What if the very thing that drives you to greatness is also the thing slowly destroying you? The voice that tells you to be better, stronger, untouchable. What if that voice never lets you rest, never lets you feel enough? That is the inner war of Vegeta in Dragon Ball Z. Because Vegeta isn't just fighting enemies, he's fighting an identity built on pride, pressure, and the constant need to prove his worth. From the moment we meet Vegeta, he is defined by one thing: pride. Not just confidence, but a deep, unshakable belief in his superiority. He is the Prince of all Saiyans, a title that carries history, expectation, and responsibility. But beneath that pride is something far more fragile, a need to validate his existence in a world where his status no longer guarantees dominance. Because Vegeta's identity was formed in a very specific environment, a warrior race, a culture that values strength above all else, where your worth is measured by your power, your rank, your ability to dominate. In that world, vulnerability is weakness, emotion is irrelevant, and failure is unacceptable. So Vegeta learns early, if you are not the strongest, you are nothing. And that belief becomes the core of his identity. But then, everything changes when he encounters Goku. Goku represents something Vegeta cannot understand. He is strong, but not driven by pride. He grows, but not out of insecurity. He fights, but not to prove superiority. And this creates a psychological conflict within Vegeta that defines his entire journey. Because for the first time, Vegeta is faced with someone who challenges not just his strength, but his belief system. Every time Goku surpasses him, it's not just a physical defeat, it's an identity crisis. Because if someone without royal blood, without the same background, without the same motivations, can become stronger, then what does that say about everything Vegeta believes? This is where rivalry becomes more than competition, it becomes obsession. Vegeta doesn't just want to win, he needs to prove that he is still who he believes himself to be, that his pride is justified. And this need pushes him further and further, driving his growth, but also deepening his internal conflict. Because no matter how strong he becomes, Goku continues to rise. And that creates something dangerous, a cycle of comparison. Vegeta begins to measure himself not by his own progress, but by someone else's. And in that cycle, satisfaction becomes impossible. Because even when he improves, it's never enough. There's always another level, another gap, another reason to feel behind. This is the cost of rivalry when it's rooted in insecurity. It turns growth into pressure, progress into frustration, and strength into something that never feels complete. But here's where Vegeta's story becomes powerful, because he doesn't stay the same. Over time, something begins to shift, not immediately, not easily, but gradually. Through his experiences, his battles, and most importantly, his relationships, Vegeta begins to encounter something he was never taught to value: connection. His bond with Bulma introduces him to a different kind of life, one not defined by constant combat, but by presence, by family, by something beyond power. And his relationship with Trunks becomes a turning point. Because for the first time, Vegeta is not just a warrior, he is a father. And that changes everything. Because when you care about someone beyond yourself, your priorities shift, your perspective expands, and your identity begins to evolve. This is most evident in one of the most defining moments of his journey, when he chooses to sacrifice himself. This moment is not about pride, it's not about rivalry, it's not about proving anything. It's about protection, it's about love. And for someone who once defined himself purely through strength, that shift represents true transformation. Because humility is not weakness, it's awareness. To recognize that your worth is not limited to one dimension. Vegeta doesn't lose his pride, but he refines it. It becomes less about superiority and more about self-respect. Less about comparison and more about growth. He begins to understand that strength is not just physical, it's emotional. It's the ability to care, to protect, to choose something greater than your own ego. But his journey is not perfect. There are moments where he falls back into old patterns. Moments where his pride resurfaces, where his need to prove himself takes over. And that's important, because real growth is not linear. It's a process of learning, failing, adjusting, and continuing. Vegeta's rivalry with Goku never truly disappears, but it evolves. It becomes less toxic, less obsessive. It transforms into something more balanced, a source of motivation rather than insecurity. And that shift allows Vegeta to finally experience something he never had before: peace within himself. Because when you stop comparing yourself to others, you create space to recognize your own value. You begin to see your progress, your strengths, your identity, independent of anyone else. And that is where true confidence comes from. Not from being better than someone else, but from being secure in who you are. Vegeta's story teaches a powerful lesson. Pride can be both a strength and a limitation. It can push you to achieve greatness, but if left unchecked, it can trap you in a cycle of never feeling enough. But when pride is balanced with humility, it transforms. It becomes discipline. It becomes resilience. It becomes self-mastery. At the end of the day, Vegeta is not just a warrior. He is a reflection of internal struggle. The battle between ego and growth, between comparison and self-acceptance, between who you think you should be and who you are becoming. He started as a prince defined by pride, but became a man defined by growth. And in that transformation, he didn't just become stronger, he became complete.